Hello, everybody. We're going to give people a couple minutes to get in. We're a couple minutes early joining, so that will be good. Just going to adjust my light a little bit. So we're going to get started in just a minute. Welcome, everybody. Lots of light issues here, so there, it's a little bit better. There we go. Welcome, welcome. Happy Wednesday. We are here to talk about pricing today, pricing 101. And absolutely are going to dive right into that. We're going to give people a moment just to join us and get settled in. Would love to hear takeaways in the chat, or if you want to unmute from what you've put into action so far, or what you've got on your list to put on so far. So let me know. Drop in the chat. We'll give people another minute or two to join. I know it's always a scramble getting there on time. So Sean's just dropped it in the chat. You can grab your workbook. So that's excellent. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Connor, for being here. Welcome, Angela. I'm glad you're back. Alexis, I'm not sure if you're there or someone on your team is there. So glad you're back with us live. It's wonderful, and we're going to get started in just a moment. So hope everybody's having a great day, great week so far. We're headed into Wednesday. Lots of opportunity to still learn lots of things, and I know today is usually one of the most favorite sessions. So you are in the right place if you're here for Financial Foundation to Entrepreneurial Peace Training, where we're learning the keys to financial basics and money mastery. On day one, we covered cash flow 101 and why it's important to know your numbers. That's key number one. Yesterday, we covered off key number two, which is cash flow forecasting 101. If you didn't have a chance to attend live and you're watching this on the replay as well, I know some people had emailed me that their schedules didn't allow them to show up live, but they are catching the replays. You can grab that from those emails that we're sending out. You get the reminders in the morning, an hour before we start, and then around 4:30 Eastern in the afternoon, you're getting that replay from the session as well as the pages from the workbook, so that you can grab those and you don't need to do anything to take those notes. So you've got everything at your fingertips. Excuse me, got a little tickle in my throat. So we're so happy you're here with us. I've been really excited to hear the learnings, to hear what people have been taking away. Had some great chats this morning with a couple of participants. So I invite everybody who's either watching live or catching the replays to book the 15 minutes with me. Would love to get to know you. So Angela, if you have some time, even Alexis, if you got some time, the link is there. Sean has dropped it for Calendly, just to get to know you and what your specific goals are, which is fantastic. So anything I can do to support you. It's really fun for me to offer this training. Hey, Judy, welcome. Fun for me to offer this training and be able to see the action that's taken. I find it extremely inspiring learning about so many different businesses and seeing things actually get put into action this week. And once you start motion and you've got things rolling, it tends to continue. It's usually that getting started, which is the challenge. So you've made a great decision. You've taken that first step by being here, by signing up, by watching, whether you're live or, as I said, on the replays. So you want to keep that motion going and take control of things financially. So just as a reminder, if you're just joining in, if you don't have your workbook yet, Sean has popped the link in the chat. It is also always in those emails that are coming out in the afternoon. You got your workbook there. And if you do want to book a chat with me, which I would so love to do, you can do that with the link in Calendly, and that link is in the emails as well. So let's get to know each other a little bit better. And that's wonderful. So let's get into today's topic. Really important topic. I know it's a challenge for many. As I've mentioned, my name is Tracy Bissett. I am a financial coach for entrepreneurs. My background is predominantly in financial services and banking, helping companies get access to the financing they needed, as well as approving loans for businesses. So I've been doing that for 20 years plus. When I started my own business, I wanted to get back to working directly with customers and directly with business owners and being able to help them directly in their business. And so for me, as I said, it's a great joy to be able to take the mystery out of some of the money pieces and to make sense of that. And learning about all the different industries and the little tweaks that can be made is fun. I generally work with entrepreneurs, sales up to about $2 million. Beyond that, I find that there is generally a financial professional on point who's helping guide those companies. And so they're well served that way. But I can tell you with the work that I'm doing with entrepreneurs online and offline, those sales up to $2 million, there is one common theme that consistently comes through. And I would say, I think the percentage is about 85% of the people that I work with, their pricing is a problem. So they're not making enough profit. Some may be losing money on everything that they are selling. And so what that does is it does not allow you to get a steady paycheck, does not allow for reinvestment in the business. It creates all kinds of challenges. And so we're going to dig into today, not just the math, because we got to look at numbers to make sure that our pricing makes sense, but we also have to dig into the emotional part of that. Because money is a really emotional thing. Finances are emotional things. And so we want to make sure that when we're thinking about stuff, we're really in tune with ourselves and we know what could be our potential pitfalls that are coming up. So if you want to grab your workbook, page 7 is where we're starting, Pricing 101, key number 3. And we're going to go through the math part first, so kind of the more technical part. And the advice I've been giving all week for those who've been here or catching the replays, or if you're new today and you're catching this session because you know pricing is a concern, we should be able to do everything very simply. And if we can't talk through it and jot down some numbers on a piece of paper initially, we're probably making it too complicated. So always think about that as kind of your overarching thing when you're thinking about your numbers and your finances. But let's make it simple first. We can always get into more details, but if we can't understand it simply, we're going to have a hard time when we start layering on more complexity. So the top of page 7, the first thing is, it is important to focus on the bottom line versus the top line. Okay. So it's important to focus on the bottom line versus the top line. And I know when I've said this sometimes in interviews or I've talked to clients, they said, okay, that's great, Tracy, but I don't know exactly what that means. So let me break that down for you. Top line being sales. So what are all the sales that you're making in your business, and figuring that out. And then bottom line being sales minus your expenses. What's that profit? Hey, Helen, welcome. She's at her cottage. She looks like she's all tanned. So, welcome. So top line sales, bottom line is profit. And I think there's a big problem we have in our culture right now. Certainly we have all of this hype around sales. Great launch, record sales, 6-figure launch, 7-figure launch. And that's great. But how much money did you make? And I can tell you, especially if you're spending money on ads or you're spending a lot on other expenses, I don't really care what your sales are. I care how much money you're actually making and taking home, because you're doing this to create a livelihood for yourself. You probably want to support your family. You may have other goals, whether it be to grow your business. So you need profit to be able to reinvest in the business. Whatever your goals are, unless you're a not-for-profit, you didn't sign up to not make any money. And chances are you're actually losing money. And you don't necessarily know. You aren't sure what's going on, and you know there's a little bit of an issue. So it's important to focus on the bottom line versus the top line. And so top line being sales, bottom line being profit. And Helen, you can grab in the chat there the link for the workbook if you need it. Okay, you're all set, and we're on page 7, Pricing 101. So know your break even. And break even, all that really means is you cover all your costs and you don't make any profit. If we're truly measuring, oh, thanks. That's great, Helen. Glad that you can make it live today. If you are truly covering all your costs, you're actually paying yourself a salary too, if you're breaking even and your salary is in there. Okay. So generally, we don't have a goal profit of 0, but that's kind of our minimum we have to hit. And so to calculate our break even, we have sales, so all the things we sell, minus our variable costs, which are expenses we have to pay because we sold something. So if I'm doing selling a coaching program, the time that I'm spending coaching, for me to do that, that expense only gets incurred and I have to pay me or someone else to do it because we sold the course. I wouldn't have to pay someone to teach it if I didn't sell it. So that's a variable cost. Something like credit card processing fees are variable costs. So we only pay them because somebody's making a transaction with us. Okay. So variable costs are the things that we only have to pay because we made the sale. So sales minus variable costs equals our gross profit. I'll get Sean to throw that recap in the chat now, just so everybody's with me. From there, we take off our fixed costs. So there's a whole bunch of people that we owe money to who don't care if we sell anything. They want to get paid every single month, like rent, like insurance, like our internet, like our cell phone, all those subscriptions we might use in our business for. Maybe it's Gmail, maybe it's Canva, maybe it is our CRM. Everything that we're spending money on that nobody cares if we're making any profit, we got to pay them every month. And so those aren't negotiable. We don't get to choose. We got to pay those whether or not we sell anything. So sales minus variable costs gives us our gross profit, minus those fixed costs gives us our net profit. And it's so important to understand the costs and all of the costs. So lots of people that I know, and I do it sometimes too, so I'm not going to hold myself out as some kind of perfect model for what to do. Sometimes we do the math in our head. And we just think we know all the expenses and we kind of rhyme them off in our head and we think, oh yeah, we're making money. But you're not going to get them all. There's these stupid little plugins I have to pay for with a couple different things. And they cost 50 or 60 bucks a month. If I don't look at my statements and look at all my invoice or my receipts and what I've paid, look at my credit card statement, I forget about those. Because who knew that I needed this thing to where, like with my website, to link to the shopping cart, to link to my little classroom online. All those things add up. So we need to be clear that we're actually assessing all of our costs. If we have employees, do they have separate access and we need different licenses for all of them? Have we changed our staffing? Do we have different levels going on? So maybe we don't need to pay all of those, but we can't get comfortable and figure out if we're making any money if we're not thinking about all of the costs. Okay. So don't do it in your head, write it down. Angela, for you, because you're getting started, Excel is a great place to jot that down. Like every time you take on a new expense, just put it in the spreadsheet, put the amount. If it's variable, you can take a peek at that. But that way you don't have to remember. We don't want to tie up our mind and all do that mental math when we need to focus on our customers, because that's why we're here. Okay. And so the biggest mistake I see entrepreneurs make is not charging for their time. And so especially service-based providers, because, oh, it's just my time. I can work later. I can work on the weekend. I can just get it done. We're not thinking about how much time are we actually working. Even when we're designing our offerings, we may not be thinking about how many hours do we actually want to work? And then what would that lead to in revenue? And so how does that all play out? It's kind of like a little puzzle. I think yesterday I talked about being a financial detective, and I think it's fun, like a puzzle. Not everybody thinks it's fun, but if you can get to the place where it's fun, so you have the kind of life that you want, then the pieces all kind of start moving together, which is really key. And so make sure you're charging for your time when you do your calculations to see if you're making money on your offerings. And so Judy, for you guys at your firm, you might have different levels of people working on a project. You're going to need to take into account how many hours are you going to work on something at your rate versus somebody maybe more junior doing some things. But what is all that time, and actually thinking through the actual amount of hours? Whether or not it ultimately gets into the bill, that's a different thing. That's a decision, but understanding what your true cost is to you. Because there's the amount you might charge out at, but there's the amount that needs to be covered in order to cover salaries and things like that. So charge for your time. And so now we're going to move, I'm going to pause here for just a second, see if there's questions on the math. and how we think about the math. Everybody's okay? So far, so good. So now we're going to go in a little bit different direction. We need to think about ourselves. So we need to focus on you, on yourself, and your business. So what is your money story? And I'm going to tell you a story about me and my upbringing and growing up. And this is all relevant. It might not seem like it quite yet, so just stay with me on this point. So when I was a kid, I wanted to go to the corner store every day in the summer. And I went to my mom the first day and I said, can I have some money? And she said, okay, here's a quarter, here's 50 cents. You can go to Green Gables, get your whatever, my slushie, my sour soothers, my chips. I went back day 2, summer vacation. I want to go to the store. Nope, Tracy, you had your money for the week. That's it. We have money, but not for that. So I knew we had a budget, but they were not giving me unlimited funds to be going off to the store every day to get my treats. So I realized that I needed to find a way to get some money. So I'm like 7 years old at this point. I'm not very old, but I realized there would be a way that I could get some money. So with my friend, we went out in our neighborhood. We figured out ways to get money. We had the lemonade stand. We had little clubs for kids. We would charge them to come and play with us, and we would make up games and do things with them. We had a little community newspaper, Flashy News, and we would go around and interview our neighbors, and then we would write stories based on what they told us, and then we would go back and sell it to them for 25, 50 cents. So we were doing all of this kind of thing so we could get to the store. Sometimes we found some toys we didn't want anymore. We'd have a little garage sale on our own, and it worked. But I learned at that point in time when I was 7 years old that you can do stuff and get money and use it as a tool to achieve the goal that you want. So obviously at 7, I'm not thinking about it quite so rationally, quite that way. But I knew that if I do something, I can then use that money to get what I want. As I got a little bit older, I was babysitting. I used to make $2 an hour, I think. I would figure out if I babysat for this many hours, how many books could I buy? Because I love different series of books. And that kind of went on. I had a little home taking care of business, Colby Castle Care, we used to call it, because I lived in Colby Village in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. And I would take care of the plants when people went on vacation in the summer. I would take care of their animals. I would subcontract to my brother to mow the lawn. So I wasn't going to do the lawn mowing, but it was all with this thought, when I get money, I can get the stuff that I wanted. When I was in high school, I worked my butt off as a waitress, and I saved $7,000 for my first year of university because I knew I wanted to go away to school. So that only covered half. So that's my money story. We talked about money as a family. I knew we had a budget. My mom would make a grocery list and itemize everything. She would go every 2 weeks on my dad's payday. We had one car. I knew we were not necessarily better off than a lot of people in our neighborhood, but we weren't worse off. We were kind of middle of the road in my subdivision where we lived. But all that stuff forms the way I think about money. And so I'm fairly unemotional about money. I think about it as this tool I can use to do stuff, and it enables me to do things, but I don't ever necessarily feel the guilt, the shame, the concern that maybe other people have. And it all depends on your upbringing. So think about your money story. When you were like 5, 6, 7 years old, what was going on in your house? Were people yelling? Were people saying, we can't afford that? Was it whatever you want, we can have it anytime? I've worked a lot with kids, and certainly through Girl Guides, volunteered with the little sparks, like the 5, 6-year-old little girls. I've had a little girl 5 years old tell me money's evil. Like, what goes on in her house that she probably doesn't know what money is, but she knows that money's evil. And to the degree that she's willing to share that and vocalize it. She doesn't just feel it, she knows that to be true in her experience. So what was going on in your life? And I can guarantee that whatever was going on still controls and impacts the decisions you make today and the feelings you have today. So what comes up for you when you ask for a sale in your business? And Angela, you're getting started, so you might not have asked yet for any sales, but anticipating how you might feel, are you going to feel bad about that? Are you going to start feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't think it's worth that. Who's going to pay that? What are they going to say about me? Are they going to say, how dare they? How could they charge that much? all of those feelings start to creep in. We also have other people in our lives who may not know much about our business, and they might be family members, they might be friends, they might be super well intentioned, but who does she think she is charging that? Why is she making those courses and selling them? Or why are they doing that? And they're very nice people. They usually care about us, but they're saying things that don't help us. And then it kind of gets into our head. And then the moment when we're supposed to say our prices, we kind of stumble, and then we might back off and we may not go for the price we really know we're supposed to charge, because we've done the math. We've done the math. We know what we're supposed to do to break even. But all this other stuff is coming up. So if every time you get a bill in your inbox or it comes in the mail, if you feel a pit in your stomach, that's part of your money story. If you feel anxious when you know you've got a lot of stuff coming up, people are going to be relying on you, whatever it may be, that's your money story. And the good thing is you can change it. So we're going to have some bonus sessions over the weekend. And on Sunday, I'm going to go really deep on money mindset and how all that kind of fits together. So hopefully you can join us live, or you can catch the replay. But if you catch any replays, that's a really great one to do, because I'm going to talk through the different mindsets and what that means and how you can identify which one you are and how to actually overcome. Because the great thing is we can all change. We can't just turn on a light or flip a switch and change, but with practice and some new routines, we can definitely change the way we think and we feel about money. So throwing that out there so everybody's aware. So what's your money story? If I can tell by the facial reactions, people are having memories that are popping into their head, so jot them down. If you wanted to share in the chat or verbally, great. If you don't, that's fine as well, because I know it's a very personal thing and it can be very private. So if you want to share, happy to hear, but I also don't want to put anybody on the spot with that, because I know that it's really personal stuff, and it might be the first time you're actually kind of putting 2 and 2 together as I'm saying like that. Oh, spend like there's no tomorrow. Yeah. A woman many of us know, who's an awesome entrepreneur out of California. In her family, they grew up on low income assistance, and every time that you got money, you spent it in the same day. All the money for whatever 2 weeks or the next month, you spent it, and that's what you did. And so she went into her adulthood thinking like that and doing it. And then she met her future husband. He's like, "What are you doing? We have to like save for this and that and do this." And that was like a whole transformation in mind. So whatever happened when you were a kid, I guarantee it's still with you unless you've actively done that work to make that change. So then what comes up for you when you're setting your prices? Are you being really clinical about it? For Judy, because of the business that you and Lori have, you just can't pick a number out of the air and hope that it's right. Not with the design work for homes that you're doing and building homes. That's just a recipe for disaster. And so people do that, but you've got to be a little bit more unemotional and clinical about the numbers. So Angela's saying, my family saved everything, hard workers, even now they have money, but will not let go of it. Yeah, that can be another one. So that sometimes then if you've made money and your goals are to accomplish certain things and to go and maybe have certain experiences or to acquire a certain home or a car, that can then be those nice, well-intentioned friends and family members saying, "What are you doing? We don't do that. We save our money and we keep it just because we might need it another day," without thinking about, okay, no, I have a financial plan. I can take this much and do it. And the one other piece of advice I will say is, I talk about this a lot on the Young Money podcast, is mind your own business about money. So it happens 2 ways. So number one, don't be judging others. Don't be looking at whatever you see and making these little judgments in your head, as we all do. We don't know their situation. So we can see everything on social media. And I can tell you, I see lots of my clients on social media, and the story that's out there is not quite like the financial results that I have seen. So don't believe everything you see, but it's also none of your business. They're doing their thing, you do your thing. So also mind your own business about them, but also for ourselves to be telling other people, like, it's not your business. And so if you're getting a lot of those well-intentioned comments or feedbacks, you know what, that's great. I'm glad that we're friends or that we're family members. I love you, but I don't want to talk about my business with you. Stop. Okay. And so you have to kind of manage your boundaries a little bit. Helen saying, interesting, good to revisit this. There was no structure growing up. I had to learn myself. So some patterns continue. And not allowed growing up so often. Other family members went into debt. And so that's also a learned thing. Because to me, debt's not good or bad. Debt is a tool that you can use to get things that you want. You don't want too much, because then you're going to hit a tipping point where you can't pay for it. And everything can kind of fall down. And that's when you might get in personally, like a bankruptcy or something like that. But some level of debt is good if you're comfortable. And that comes down to then everybody having a different risk tolerance. So mind your own business about money. Don't judge other people. Don't judge yourself. Try to think about it from an actual rational standpoint if you can. So when you're setting your prices, how are you doing it? Okay. What are you thinking about when you're doing that? And so I want to talk about a couple of things in terms of pricing. And we're still on the bottom of page 7. So I kind of like to come at pricing from 2 places. One, the top level, we're going to scan the competitive landscape. We're going to see, firstly, we're going to assess what's our positioning and what's the value of what we're offering before we even necessarily put a number on it, or we might have a number on it. But then we're going to look at our competitors. What are other people doing? And just because they do the same thing as us doesn't mean they do it the same way. It doesn't mean they offer the same value. And it doesn't mean that we're targeting the same clients. So just because their price is X doesn't mean that ours needs to be X. They might be going to be the low cost provider, find as many clients as they can, cheapest price possible. Even though we might be doing the same thing, we might be adding more value added services. We might have more experience if we're a provider ourselves, lots of experience to be able to support that. And so we're also targeting a client who may be less price sensitive. And so our price is higher than their price. And that's okay, as long as we can communicate what the value is that we're offering and why we stand behind it. And that's usually where some of this resistance will come up. Because first thing out of most people's mouths is, oh, wow, that's a lot, or depending who you're talking to, especially if you're talking to the wrong people who aren't actually your target clients. But being able to stand in that and communicate the value that you're offering. So we're scanning the landscape, we're figuring out where do we kind of stand in terms of getting a price, but then we have to come from the bottom up and to figure out those costs that we already talked about. So what are the costs that we have to pay no matter what, as well as those variable costs, because we're doing it. And if we can't make any money on it, then we have a decision to make. So if we found that the market doesn't allow us to go beyond a certain amount, but we can't offer it for an amount that kind of fits within there, and we don't think we can articulate value to charge more, maybe we need to find a different client base. Maybe we need to tweak what we're offering. We need to do something a little bit different. If we can ideally do all this before we get into business, all the better. Most people don't do that because they don't do a business plan. So wherever you are and you're tuning in and you're hearing this today, it's always a good time to review your pricing. Does it make sense? Have you actually advanced in your skill set since you first started your offerings? Maybe you have more knowledge. Maybe you've got more credentials. Maybe you've been able to do more things. And so you can actually charge more. Think about lawyers. As they get more experience, their rate goes up. Nobody questions that, right? That's a pretty easy thing everybody gets their head around. Lawyers are expensive. I expect to pay them money. The ones with more experience charge me more. So think about that same kind of concept and bring it into your thinking. And so it's critical to charge your worth and get a steady paycheck. And as I said, about 85% of the clients that I'm working with, when we start working together, there's financial challenges. They're not getting paid consistently. They're really feeling consumed with the anxiety about the cash flow and the financial position. And the culprit usually is the pricing. The very good news is, though, that with modest tweaks or a shift in who's the target client, that can be rectified. Even thinking about, I've done a lot of work with auto repair garages, oil change garages, body shops, companies that put on rust coating on cars. They're typically not charging for those supplies they might use in the delivery of their service. So they use rags. They're going to have a couple other things that are kind of depleted in their thing. as they're going through in their appointment, if you will, the service appointment. But they're not charging for that. And then all of a sudden they're not making as much money as they could. You add $5 or $10 on now per service appointment, all of a sudden your margin starts growing. And it's about those incremental changes, which is how you can make the money. If you know you're chronically underpricing, though, you certainly need to take a bigger step at that point. I'm going to pause there, see if any comments, questions, anything people would like to add for where we are. You might be sitting with your thoughts because this brings up a lot of stuff. All right. So we're going to flip over to page 8. If you have a question or a comment as well, feel free to send it just to me. If you don't want to share with the whole group as well, that's fine too. So the key takeaway I want you to think about when thinking about my pricing, what do I know I need to dig into for possible changes or already know I need to change? So like I was giving kind of the example with Judy, if you haven't yet in your process delineated all the people who need to participate in a project, how many hours it takes each one of them and the charge out and the cost of them, that's the first step. And then what other kind of expenses? So if you need to get certain things registered, if you need access to certain subscriptions that very much for that could be passed along to the client, you got to pass along disbursements, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're getting that all in there. And another tip around when you're pricing out, if you do have staff and they are an employee, when you're pricing out the amount that you're including as the cost, it's not the hourly rate or just the salary that you're paying them. It's actually the hourly amount that you come up with plus the benefits, the vacation, all that stuff. So usually on an hourly rate, it's going up from anywhere from like $4 or $5 to 15 more on top. So if you're not factoring that in, all of a sudden you're already under the water with your pricing. So very important to think about. Okay. And so action item for tonight, thinking about my prices. Have I validated them in the market? Is there room to increase them? And am I charging for my time? Thanks, Angela. Appreciate that. Book some time and then I can catch you up if you have a chance. Okay. So I want to share a story about a service-based provider I was working with, a lawyer, very successful. She was the primary legal mind in the firm, had several associates in place, and then was working really, really hard, like 18 hours a day. So in a year, they would have for the firm, say, $300,000 in billing. The rates were okay. She had some room to move on the rates. But what also kind of tied into this, we got our prices, we've got everything done. Then we're actually thinking about what is our process for the payments. So this comes back all to the cash flow. She was very slow at invoicing, and it took her a long time. So sometimes she didn't send invoices for like 6 months after she finished working on a matter for a client. And so even myself, who always pays their bills, if I get a bill that much later after we've done the work, I'm not overly excited to be paying it at that time. I'm going to pay it, but not everybody feels that same kind of way. And from my credit background, I know one of the keys to whether someone's going to pay you is cash flow. But the most important criteria is actually their character and what they will do. They might have the cash and still not pay you because for whatever reason, they don't feel like they need to. And so she was getting a lot of pushback. People weren't paying because the invoices were coming so late, maybe disputes at that time, because if it's also not close to the time of doing the work, then it's, did you really do that many hours? What was happening for that? And so she would write off in a given year, 100,000 of the 300. So I said, well, why don't you kind of split the difference here? Why don't you put in practice like good invoicing and then follow-up procedures to get paid? And why don't you work less? Why don't you work 12 hours a day and just hit 200,000 in sales? You're going to be at the same place from an economical standpoint, financial standpoint, but you're actually going to be farther ahead from a reputational. Because the thing we don't always think about is that all this stuff that's financial actually then can impact the reputation that our company has out in the market, what people think about us, what our clients are thinking about us. We talked about Sean saying he's going to chase the people for the payment if she doesn't want it. And it was just, how it slowly happens. This happens to all of us. Super busy delivering for clients. That's administration, fell to the kind of the bottom of the pile, didn't get dealt with. And so why not work less, build a good system for invoicing, follow up for collection, and then call it a day. And your reputation still is intact. People feel that you're credible and very responsible. So that's an example. I mentioned around kind of the body shop oil change stuff, just putting in something for those supplies. So is there anything in your business where you're kind of using it, but you didn't drill into the amount? And there's some small stuff that we use or we might do that we're not going to necessarily get into, like 20 cents for this, $1.30 for that. But we might create a bundle of, we know we've got this stuff that gets involved when we sell something to a client, and we want to make sure those costs are covered. And so it's not that we're detailing it all for our clients, depends on the business that we're in, how much disclosure we're going to show. We might have just our project fee, and maybe we're putting it into an hourly rate. I know for Sean, we were talking about it yesterday in Cash Control Boot Camp, but how do you show that stuff to a client? And so my best practice for doing quotations, and so a lot of you would do quotations, I know Helen as well with her consulting, actually itemize everything that's going to go into the work that you need to do. And this is for yourself. So every person that's going to be involved, how many hours, what's the rate that it costs you, what other things are going to be in the project if you have to have anything that you're physically delivering. Make sure you've mapped that out and get to the total. Add in a buffer. Usually, like even kind of rule of thumb on constructions, 10%. If you're not sure how long it's going to take you, add in a little bit of buffer, because we certainly know with certainty that things take way longer than we think. Even with best intentions, best planning, everything, there's always something that comes up. So give yourself a little bit of a buffer. And so get to that total. Maybe you're showing that as like a total project fee to your client. You don't need to get into hourly rate and break it out that way, but you do need to get into the hourly details when you're figuring out how much to charge them. And then the best part of this practice is to come back when that project is finished or that job is finished, assess how many hours did I actually do. So if you're not getting paid by the hour and you put that flat fee out there, what did we actually do in reality? And how close was it to the quote that we thought or our estimate? And if we realize we've made some mistakes there, because maybe we didn't do it before, we didn't know how long it was going to take us, that's our learning for the next time we quote on a project. So if you're billing by the hour, that's one thing, but you want to make sure you've got enough buffer in there. But if you're doing a project-based fee, and that applies for web design, consulting, any kind of service-based, even kind of design work where it's not very specific in terms of all of those things. So that's a really good practice. And I can tell you that the clients that I work with who implement that, they're seeing those increases in the margins. They're not getting these surprises at the end of the day where they're not making money, or what the heck happens. Like I did all this work and now I don't have as much to show for it as I thought. Perfect. Judy's saying they do that after every project. You have to, especially the business that you are in. And you've gotten better at invoicing, which is great. That's probably all your process improvements we were talking about this morning. So that's wonderful. So key to have your eye on those costs so then you can make those changes. It also, from a planning standpoint, so if I thought I could take on 5 consulting projects right now and I mapped out the hours that it was going to take, I'm probably going to be up all night trying to figure out how to deliver all my consulting projects because things are taking longer than I imagined. And so yeah, getting clear on that. If Helen's able to come out, I was going to ask her some questions about her work, whether she bills by the hour or there's project rates or a combination of both.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I had to jump on a quick call, but I have done this before. And so I tell you, Tracy, this was good timing because I just had to do my taxes and I am a scrambler. And I'm tired of it because I'm like, oh, I'm sure I'm like missing expenses and just ridiculous, like wasting time and effort and money, right? So I had, after doing this previously, started to get my spreadsheet together and starting to do the monthly. And then I still was like, reconciling things, and wait a minute, that was paid in 2021, not in 2020, even though I billed it in 2020. And it's like, I need to get that monthly cadence going. But I have been so I do both. I charge hourly for some things, and then I charge flat fees for projects, like in my proposals. And I'm trying to get away from hourly, because I find, it's that whole worth discussion you have, and small businesses that I support,
and take the opportunity just to tell everybody about your business, what you do.
Oh yes,
Judy
sorry
and
about
I
that.
know,
Yeah.
but
So HR, I have an HR consulting, and so, much I don't do every area within HR. Like I don't necessarily do job evaluation and comp planning. I partner with other people, but pretty much end-to-end cycle, like from recruiting right through to helping people exit. And historically, when I started, I was more of a freelance, right? So it was something that just came to me, and their contract was always hourly and it was set hours. And so, I'm trying to get out of that. And so it's been a shift. Also, a lot of small businesses, so they don't like high hourly rates.
Yeah.
And they, kind of a shocker. But I'm shifting now to really just looking at projects, and how much is that? How much, I've been trying to track the time, and then repeatable business that it's scalable, so that I know how much time I spent on this project. Say, for an example, an employee manual, how much time I spent. And now that I have all those samples, the next time I actually have my HR assistant do it, who I only pay a certain amount, but I can charge out at my fee for the project. So it takes a while. Like, that's the thing I was going to ask you, and that's why this discussion was good, because without tracking it and kind of really knowing how much time I'm spending, how much time the assistant is spending tweaking or doing things, and then really figuring out that right amount. And I did do a competitor, like I was underselling for sure.
Underpricing?
Myself.
No.
Yeah, especially on the hourly fee structure. So recently with one client, I did the rate, because we always had an hourly model, and it was a hard conversation. It was like so uncomfortable for me to push for it, even though partially because of COVID and the revenues being hit. You do feel that guilt, and like, oh, I'm asking them for more money. They just got out of this, like, revenues being cut, but it's like, I did it and the COO was fine. And I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? So
sometimes we negotiate with ourselves in our mind, and we make up these whole scenarios that don't exist, and we make up what people will say. And then we talk ourselves out of having the conversation, but having the conversation allows them to tell you what they actually think, and it gives you a chance to respond. Lots of times it goes fine, but it also gives you a chance to then reevaluate. So, okay, if I do want to continue on at this lower rate, here's it only as long as I'm going to do it. And I'm willing to keep working with you. I value you very much. But I have my own expenses. Life keeps getting more expensive. I need to keep my business running as well. So.
And I'm dealing with CEOs and COOs, and so like I need to be in that same mindset. So that's the shift I've been working on. And I'm still new in business. Like I had my company a long time ago, but I really only reignited it in about May of 2019. And so I had just been starting when 2020 hit. And so to try to keep going, it was, again, having all of this infrastructure. So yeah, the money, I will be looking at that discussion because I am getting a lot better as far as I have I have been spending almost everything in the past, but now I've been creating my buffer, my 3-month buffer in my business account. So in hearing you, I'm like, I have done some of these things, Tracy, but I have a long way to go still, but it's been progress, right? And I realize
that's the point. Yeah, positive progress. We can't do everything in one day.
yeah, you can't wear all those hats all the time. So this is always a good reminder about what I can outsource or delegate. And but yeah, so this thing about getting what I wanted to ask you about on the topic is the competitive rates and how to go about that, because not everybody wants to share, which is
No, but
interesting.
I think because we know a lot of the same people, I think we know enough people to ask on an informal basis. And it's not that they're necessarily published rates on their website, but I think between us, we probably know 5 to 10 people we could ask.
Yeah, and then as you shift to offering a specific offer on training done yet, I'll have to, create figure that out, because I it's only been the work that I do. And so, yeah, I think I'm comparable, or in some cases I was lower. And so I needed to, this was the year, like, no more. If you don't want to, if this isn't good, I'm not going to cut those rates. Like, I just not, it's not worth it to get the business, really.
Well, and you're also very unique because not only are you a skilled person in HR, you also have legal credentials. So sometimes people ask you to do things because they don't want to get a lawyer as well, but you need to be compensated for all the skills that you're bringing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to add 2 things to what you said, though, because one, you were saying without tracking the time, how are we going to know? So clearly, when you're doing something new, like the first time you're making a manual and you're still kind of sorting templates, like there's always going to be the very specific work per client. Some of that time is for you to eat because you're developing your capabilities in that one thing. And then it's not necessarily about the fact that maybe now you can do a manual in 5 hours, where the first time it took you 20. You still need to be paid for your expertise. And the fact that you could do it now in 5 hours is not how many hours you should get paid. And so makes perfect sense what you were talking about those project fees. But still then drilling into how much time are you spending on it? How much time is your HR assistant spending? Any other things you might need to do or have expensed against it. So you can actually see your true profit against that one project, from like the sales minus your variable cost to get that gross profit. So
great. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Well, sounds very good. And so like we've talked about, we were talking about it yesterday, but financial fitness is a journey. We take one step forward. Sometimes we take steps off the path, but we come back on and we keep moving forward, and everybody's learning all the time. Things are changing, business is changing, industries are changing, financial services is changing. I've been doing so much digging into stuff and looking into things for young adults that I also serve. So I've been fumbling around trying to figure out digital wallets and how to buy cryptocurrency and how to buy these non-fungible tokens. So it's uncomfortable when you don't know stuff, but all we can do is ask questions, try it, move ahead, do better next time. And that's the key for everybody. So I hope that that message is coming through. Any questions that anybody else has or comments they wanted to share? No, sounds good. So I really want you to think about for your action items. So first, for key takeaway, when I think about my pricing, what do I know I need to dig into for possible changes or already know I need to change? So if there's this stuff that you never get covered and you're leaving it out, put that on your to-do list. Grab for the easy things first, okay? If you're going by hourly rate, that was the other point I wanted to mention on hourly rate. When I do consulting with a financial institution, because they're big organizations that are highly political and people change their mind all the time, and you go to meetings and you're on one path for a week and the next week you're on a different path because the project changes and the scope changes, those kinds of things, I always go hourly. So I make sure that my hourly rate is sufficient, because there's no way of scoping them, because it just becomes unwieldy, like a big dinosaur or something. It's trying to move and things change. So when you're in that kind of situation, hourly is still best. If you can't nail down the scope. If it's something you can do on your own and you can manage it, but when you've got a lot of stakeholders involved and it's at the whim of a couple of people who might just change it every week, hourly is still better to protect yourself. Okay. Then for action items, thinking about my prices, have I validated them in the market? Is there room to increase them? And am I charging for my time? So make sure that at least, especially if you're a service-based provider, if in the future, so say I hired a bunch of coaches in the future, I would at least need to be making enough to pay that for what I would pay that person, even if I'm not thinking about it right now about paying myself an hourly wage. Okay. So we need to think about that. So at a minimum, what would you have to pay somebody else is a good place to start. Even if you're not at a place yet where you can charge the wage that you think you should get based on your experience. And I'm sure everybody, whether you're live right now or you're watching me on the replay, I'm sure something is pinging in your head that you need to dig into. And I'm sure it's still kind of ruminating those money stories and what happened when you were a child and how is that still playing into what happens now. Tomorrow, we're going to get into navigating stakeholder money conversations, which is a really big one because we're not, when we're collecting our receivables, we're not throwing it out there to our client. Hey, can you do me a favor? I need to make payroll. I need your cash in. That is not the conversation. And unfortunately, I hear that one all the time. I hear that that's what people talk about when they call their clients. Your insecurities as a leader and the business owner, it's none of their business. You've delivered on your part of the work. They owe you money. That was the contract. So keep it issue focused. Stay in that conversation. But I will share some tips tomorrow about different ways to talk about that, ways we build our confidence. So Sean's saying, I had a client taking too long to pay an invoice, sent them a note. Rewrote it when I thought about those exact words. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, it's not about us. When we enter into a transaction with someone, is if we've done our part, it's focused on the transaction. Hey, I'm so glad that you loved my employee manual I made or the website I designed for you. How can we collect payment today? When will you be paying your invoice? Did you need me to send it again? Did it get misplaced in your inbox? Okay, and that happens to me all the time. I get so many emails. I'm always misplacing things. So I don't mind if people follow up with me because sometimes I just lose things and that happens. So thinking through that. And again, like I was saying, mind your own business. It's not their business what your insecurities are about your management skills or financial acumen. So keep things focused on where they need to be. So we'll have a fun dialogue on that tomorrow. Would love for those who haven't booked a call yet with me to do that. Sean will pop the link in the chat. He's got it there already. He's ahead of me. So let's have a short call, 15 minutes, and I can get to know you and your business a little bit better and be able to offer some insights based on your particular goals, which would be really fun. And as I said, we're going to have some bonus sessions on the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a Q&A. Sunday is all around money mindset and really going deep on what are the different ways that we can break that out? How can we identify what our money mindset is? And how can we actually use very tangible strategies to change if we're not happy with what our money mindset is? Because it is all something we can change and we can control. Monday, we're going to have some client testimonials, and then we're going to wrap things up next week on Tuesday. So our workbook officially wraps up on Friday, but we're going to have those bonus sessions through until next Tuesday. So thank you so much for joining me today. For those who are here live, I'm going to turn the recording off in a second. And so if anybody wants to stay and chat, happy to do that. And I will catch you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. Watch for the replay link, watch for the workbook link in your email around 4:30 Eastern this afternoon. Have a great day and go out there and charge your worth.